All right, this is Mendelian Genetics and Terminology. So first of all, I just had students in class brainstorm some ideas of human traits. I mean, there's all kinds of human traits that we could look at. Everything from, eye color to height, um, even things like, whether or not you're prone to having certain diseases. Those would all be certain human traits that we could look at in terms of genetics. On the homework assignment that you did last night, where you had to, actually talk to your parents and find out if you had certain Mendelian traits in common with them, we had things like, the ability to roll your tongue, widow's peak, hitchhiker's thumb, all those kinds of things. And so we shared those together in class on the board, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. The trait that we're actually going to analyze right now, though, is sex. So when we look at sex, um, we mean, are we looking at male or female? That is different from gender, which we talked about in class. Is a term from psychology, but sex has to do with male or female in terms of the biological perspective. Um, so again, if we're going to look at the trait of sex, obviously right here we have a male and a female. For whatever reason, my smart software thinks that male and females only exist as cowboys and cowgirls, and so that's what we have here. But if we think about a male or a female, and we're going to use the things that are in your DNA to describe a male and a female, a lot of times, and maybe you've heard of this before, we refer to as a male as being XY, whereas a female is what we call XX. Now, those things right there are called their genes. And here's the textbook definition of a gene. It's chemical factors that determine your traits. And basically, it's part of your DNA that codes for specific proteins, which determines your traits. Now, here you'll notice that the two genes that affect being male are not the same. Here we have an X and a Y. Those are not the same. And in the female, they have two X's, which are the same kinds of genes. When we have different forms of the same genes, right here, he inherited an X from one parent and a Y from the other parent. Um, we'll learn more about why the Y had to come from dad and the X came from mom. But he inherited one version of each gene, so one thing for each trait from mom and one from dad. These different versions of the same trait are called alleles. So he has an X allele and a Y allele. Now those are also related to chromosomes, which we'll talk about more in a couple weeks. But uh, the X came from mom, the Y came from dad. They both code for this trait that we're looking at here called sex. So they're just different forms of the same gene, and so we call them alleles. So another example would be like in some plants, tall versus short. Those both code for the gene for height, but they're different forms of the height gene. So we started out by looking in chapter 11 at Gregor Mendel. Gregor Mendel was a monk who lived in the 1700s, and he studied pea plants in a monastery. Now, the nice thing about pea plants is they're really easy to grow. They grow quickly. They make lots of flowers. They produce lots of seeds, and they're really easy to control. He actually covered all the flowers with these little tiny cloth sacks so that every single fertilization that was done, taking pollen from one flower and putting it on another flower, was done by him. He used these tiny little paintbrushes to do it. And he kept track of thousands and thousands of these crosses in laboratory notebooks. So the next time that you're doing a lab for me and you're complaining about all the data that you have to keep track of, just keep track, or think of Mendel, 300 years ago, having to keep track of thousands upon thousands of crosses between different pea plants. Yeah, your life's not so hard. Looking over here, these are the traits that he decided to look at. So there's seed shape, seed color, flower color, pod shape, pod color, et cetera, et cetera. He noticed that for some traits, like for seed shape, round seeds were much more common than wrinkled. Yellow seeds were much more common than green, purple flowers more common than white, so on and so forth. And so that led him to develop this thing called the principle of dominance. Now, what that means is, you'll notice up here it says dominant trait and recessive trait. Some traits or some alleles for a gene are dominant over others. So I'll just reveal this here. Some alleles are dominant and some are recessive. Okay, now think about what the term dominant means. If you dominate somebody in a wrestling match, that means that you win because you're stronger than them. Well, an allele that's dominant is, I guess you could say, stronger than a recessive allele, and so it covers it up. Um, so one of the implications of this is, since remember you inherit two from one from each parent. So if you were to get a dominant allele and a recessive allele, so if one of each is present, the dominant trait is the one that gets expressed. So if we just use letters here to represent these, let's say for seed shape, we're going to do big R for the round and little r for the wrinkled. Okay, we in science or in genetics, we use capital letters to represent the dominant allele, lowercase to represent the recessive. So if you had an offspring that got a big R from mom or dad and then a little r from the other one, even though they have both alleles, so one for round seeds, one for wrinkled seeds, because this is dominant, all of their seeds would be round in shape. They would not be wrinkled. They'd be round because this one is dominant. It covers up that one. Okay. Segregation. All I really want you to know right now, because we haven't learned about this thing called meiosis yet, is that you inherit one allele for each trait from mom and one from dad. Okay, so again, we talked about in class, this is the uncomfortable realization that at some point in time in the past, your parents did have sex, and that's how you got one allele from mom and one allele from dad. So if we look at this, this is earlobe attachment. That's one of the things you had to do on your homework. Right here, you can see dad's earlobes are free, mom's earlobes are attached. So if we say that free earlobes are dominant, so notice we're using a capital F, over attached earlobes, which is recessive, lowercase f, and you inherit one from your mom, one from dad, what alleles could these two individuals have? So if we're looking at individual A, notice they have free earlobes, so we know they have to have at least one capital F. So then the question becomes, well, what's their second allele? Because you remember, you get two alleles, one from mom and one from dad. So the second allele could either be another big F, because that would give us free earlobes, or because that's dominant, we could have a lowercase f. Because remember, this dominant will cover that up. It's not even there. So if you have the dominant trait displayed, you could either have two dominant alleles or a dominant and a recessive. This person, they have no choice. They have to be little f, little f. Because if they had a big F, they'd have free earlobes. So just a couple terminology things that go here. When we actually look at, what the alleles are, what's in your DNA, that's known as a genotype. So think what your genes actually are. That's the genotype. So big F, or little f, that would be a genotype. What you actually see, so right here, you see that, this person has free earlobes and this person has attached. That's called a phenotype. Way you can remember that is pheno starts with PH, and so does physical. So if you look at their physical traits, like what you physically see on them, that is the phenotype. Genotype, it's what's in their genes. A few more nomenclature type things here. Homozygous, remember we've talked about homo several times. Homo means the same. So when we look at homozygous, that means that they have the same alleles. An example that would be, again, we can use any letter that we want to. Let's say big X and big X. That would be homozygous because notice the two alleles are the same. Another example would be big A, or big Q, because they're the same alleles. So you guys are pretty quick, so you probably already figured out what heterozygous means then. Remember, if homozygous is same alleles, hetero, we know means different. So these are going to be different alleles. So use that word there. I'm not going to write it again. So an example of this, if we use the same letters up here, big X to little x, that would be heterozygous because they're different. Same thing with big A, or big Q, little q. So, sorry, my letters are kind of messy. I'm doing this with a mouse. It's harder than you think. A couple other terms, homozygous. We already know that's same alleles. Dominant, that's just being more specific than this. So that means that if it's homozygous dominant, they both have to be capitals, like capital P, capital P. Homozygous recessive, again, homo means same, but they're recessive now. So this would be like little t, little t. Okay, notice they're both the same, but they're recessive, so we have to do lowercase. Here they're both the same, but dominant, so we have to do capitals. Um, Generations, think about generations. If you look at your family, you and your siblings and your cousins, you're all one generation. Your parents and your aunts and uncles, they're another generation. Your grandparents, your great aunts and uncles, they're another generation. Generations we think of as being as a group of organisms that are about the same age, but they're separated by a reproductive event. So your grandparents reproduce to make your parents, which is the next generation. They reproduce to make you, so you're the next generation. Someday, a long, long, long time in the future, when you decide to reproduce, you'll make the next generation. So when we talk about parent generation in genetics, we're really concerned with just the first generation in our experiment. So if I brought in some rabbits to class and I said, hey, we're going to look at genetics and we're going to breed these rabbits over several generations, the first 2 rabbits I bring in, they'd be the parent generation. F1 generation, these are the kids or the offspring of the parent generation, what we call the P generation. Okay, so that's easy. So you breed the parents together, you get the F1 generation. F2 generation, well, they're the kids of the F1 generation. So they'd be the grandkids to the parent generation, and so on and so forth. So F3, they'd be the offspring of F2, they'd be the great grandkids of the parent generation, the grandkids of F1. All right, so now we did some practice in class. So what I want you to do is, as I reveal these, I want you to pause the video and see if you can figure it out. Now, I mean, you could sit there and cheat, but that's not really going to help you. So I want you to pause the video and try to figure out what the genotype would be. So right here we have traits, hair color, hair length, eye color, and I'm telling you what's dominant and recessive. I give you the letters that you're going to be using, so big B, little b, so on and so forth. I want you to tell me what the genotype would be for a person or an organism that's heterozygous. Remember what hetero means for hair color. Okay, hopefully you paused the video. Hair color, we're going to be using B's. Remember, hetero means different. So heterozygous for hair color, this would be big B, little b. And I want you to be thinking about why they get 2. Remember what we said, about how you get half your genes from mom and half from dad. So think about that. Let's do another one here. Hair length. Notice we're specific here. Homozygous recessive. So think about what homo means and what recessive means. Again, hopefully you paused the video there so you didn't just watch me do it because that's not going to help you on a test. Homo means the same. Recessive means they're the lowercase ones. They're the ones that get covered up. So here for hair length, we're using L's. But since it's recessive, we're not going to use the big L. We'll use the little ones. So that'd be little l, little l. Now I'm going to let you do these other ones on your own. But one that I do want to do with you is long brown hair. Okay, so I want you to take a couple minutes and see if you can figure out, and I'll tell you, there's actually 4 genotypes that would be possible for long brown hair. Keeping in mind, we've got 2 traits here, long and brown. So go ahead, pause the video, and give that a try. All right, hopefully pause that. So let's look at long and brown. Okay, well remember, long is represented by L's, brown is represented by the capital B's. You have to have 2 traits or 2 alleles for color and 2 alleles for length. So let's just get the obvious one out of the way here. If we wanted to have long hair, we could go big L, and I'm actually going to fix this here, big B, big B. That would give us brown hair that's long. Now the reason I did this way, and again, these are all going to be for this problem, but I'm putting them up here so I have enough space. We usually, by convention, put the letters in order alphabetically. So B should come before L's. So this would give us brown hair that's long. Well, think about what else could give us brown hair. Well, maybe a big B, little b, that could give us brown hair. And so long hair, we can go with the big L, big L. Okay. Um, well, if we can do big B, little b, we can probably do big L, little L and still have long hair. So another combination would be big B, big L, little L. Okay. So then, we're left with only one other possible combination here. We could do big B, little b. Oh, sorry. Made a mistake there. That happens every once in a while. Where's my eraser? I didn't even put an eraser out here because I didn't think I'd make a mistake. Silly me. All right, so big B, and then we can do a big L, little L. See, because here we have big B, big B, big B, big B, big L, big L, big L, little L. This is going to be brown hair that's long as well. So there's 4 different possible combinations that would get us brown and long hair. Hopefully, you'll see that we're just looking at 2 traits here. There's actually about 26,000 genes in the human genome, or a little more. And some of them are controlled by more than 2 alleles. And so when you start trying to put all of them together, this gets really, really complicated. Um, so one of the things that's useful is when we look at individuals, we want them to be able to, we want to be able to reproduce them and see what their offspring are going to look like. And so a tool that we can use to do that is called a Punnett square. Punnett squares, invented by a guy whose last name is Punnet. I don't remember what his first name is, doesn't matter. He he used Punnett squares to predict what the offspring of 2 individuals would look like. So here we've got person A and person B again, and we're going to breed them together. So they're married, they're going to have kids, whatever, and we're going to look at what their kids would look like. Well, I'm going to tell you in the problem that they're both homozygous. That's very helpful because remember, if we had this guy and we didn't know he was homozygous, there's 2 possible genotypes. But since he's homozygous, we know that he's going to be big F, big F. How we know that's not really important right now. We'll get to that later. Here, this one's really easy since she has attached. And we're going to use our little f, little f. Okay, so how does the Punnett square work? Well, the spots above these boxes and to the side represent the gametes, or the egg or sperm cells that the parents can make. Just by convention, we usually put dad up on top. So his genotype, remember, is big F, so it's really helpful if you go ahead and just put that in. And then on the side, we put mom, her genotype, little f, little f. So now what I want you to think about is, if dad has big F, when he makes sperm, and that's through a process called meiosis, what alleles can he give to his kids? Well, look what he has. He has a big F, so he can give half of his sperm a big F, or he can give them all the other big F. So the other half of his sperm are going to get the other big F. So notice these lines up here only have 1 allele on them. And that's because when we make something like a sperm cell or an egg cell, they only have 1 allele for each trait. Because think about it, if we put an egg and a sperm together to make a baby, 1 plus 1 equals 2. So that's what we need. For the mom, same thing. She has 2 little f's. So she can give half of her eggs a little f, the other half get, well, the other little f. So then what we do in the square is, and I had a student who once decided they were going to refer to this as the sex square, because if you think about it, a sperm and an egg come together during sex, and so that's how we make the offspring. So big F, little f, and then big F and little f, big F, little f, big F, little f. Great. So we filled out our Punnett square, but we're not done yet. We have to do something called our genotype ratios along with our phenotype ratios. So think about, if you don't remember what those mean, I want you to go back in your notes and see what genotype and phenotype mean. So if we look here, there's 1 phenotype shown in all of these 4 kids. big F, little f, big F, little. It's the same thing over and over again. So this one is really easy. Big F, little f. Think about what a ratio is for math. We've got 4 out of the 4 kids are big F, little f. So we could write that as either, 4 out of 4, or sometimes it's easier to do percentage. So this would be 100% of the offspring should be big F, little f. The phenotype ratio we get from the genotype. So big F, little f, think about that. If that's dominant, they're going to have free earlobes or detached. And again, 4 out of 4 of them are going to have that, which would be 100%. The nice thing about doing percentages is, let's say that this couple had 30 kids. I know, kind of ridiculous, but if they did, we should expect all 30 of them to have free earlobes. If number 25 came along and had attached earlobes, well, then there's a serious conversation that needs to be had between person A and person B, because that's not possible with dad's genotype. All right, so here's the solution again. You saw me work it out on the last slide. And so here's what I had students do for homework. I want you to do an F1 cross. Remember, these two people, they're our parents. Their offspring are the F1 generation. That's why I went ahead and told you here. We'll just call this one dad, and we'll call this one mom. I realize this is kind of weird because we're breeding together a brother and a sister, but that's really only that weird in humans. So just do it. So I want you to pause the video, work through this one, and then I will put the answer on here, but I really think that you would benefit from trying this before you actually see me do it. All right, hopefully you paused that video, and we'll go ahead and look at it. So just like we did the last one, dad goes on top, mom goes on the side. Dad's genotype was big F, little f. Mom was big F, little f. By the way, whenever you're doing a Punnett square problem, you should be setting it up this exact same way. That helps you, and it helps me too when I look at it, so I can kind of see, where you went wrong. So here we go. For dad, remember, he can give half of his sperm will get a big F. The other half will get a little f. Remember, dad only gives one allele to each sperm because the other allele is going to come from mom. So when an egg and sperm come together, 1 + 1 = 2, we're good to go. Mom, she has a big F and a little f. So again, half of her offspring will get a big F, the other half of her eggs will get a little f. Then we just fill in the square like normal. So big F goes here. You can sing a little song while you do this if you want to. I'm not going to sing for you. Ta-da, there is our finished Punnett square. Now, we're not done with this problem yet because I'm actually really more interested in the genotype and phenotype ratios. Remember, this is good for predicting things. So the genotype ratios, we have 3 different genotypes here. Big F, that's one of them. We have big F, little f. And we have little f, little f. So the very first thing you should do is just write down what you see in the boxes. Then count them. Well, we have 1 out of the 4 is big F, big F. 2 out of the 4 are big F, little f. And 1 of the 4 is little f, little f. So if we do the percentages here, 1 out of 4, that's 25%. 2 out of 4, that's 50%. And 1 out of 4, that's 25%. Okay, the phenotype ratios. We look at the genotypes. This person, and there's this genotype and this genotype, because they have big Fs, those are going to be free. So, if you look at this, 3 out of 4 of them have free earlobes. And then attached, I'm going to abbreviate here for the sake of time, 1 out of 4. So if we do the percentages, 3 out of 4 is 75%. I think if you have 3/4, that's 75%, or 75 cents. And 1 out of 4 is 25%. So here's the last thing. Okay, sorry about that. Mr. Lambert, he thought he needed to make an announcement. So looking at this, I'm going to ask you one more question that I'm going to leave you hanging with. And so if you can figure out the answer to this question, you should have a decent starting grasp on Punnett squares. So remember, these are good for predicting. This is what our expected outcomes of genotypes and phenotypes would be. Now, think about it when parents reproduce, which sperm and which egg come together is completely random. So what you actually see and what we should expect might not always be the same. But let's say that these two people, excuse me, had 8 children. So let's just pretend that they had 8 children. How many would have free earlobes? Would we expect to have free earlobes? So that's what I want you to think about. So if you've watched this lecture, and this is a question I didn't pose to the rest of the class, but I want you to see if you can get it. And if you come tell me what it is, and you can explain to me why that's the right answer, ooh, there might be bonus points in it for you. And some more crosses, we'll do some more of those in class. All right, there you have it.